Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. So if we could have some of our advocates come up here, that would be wonderful. Love to bring you up. Thank you. Jennifer. How about like behind me? Yeah. So I'm not by myself in this lonely thing. Come on, Rashida. Come on up. And Dan? That'd be great. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's like the wedding.
It's like the wedding. Well, thank you everybody for coming out here today. And in particular, I wanted to stand here with a tremendous number of advocates in our communities who've been pushing on expanded right to housing for a very long time. And that's why it's so important that we all stand here together. This is all of our coming together, and we're all here today to support everyone's human right to quality housing in our city of Philadelphia. It is a great honor to stand with some of the city's leading housing advocates and civil rights leaders in Philadelphia to announce a historic investment in legal assistance for low-income renters who face eviction. The city of Philadelphia has committed $500,000 a year in brand new funding, which council passed unanimously this spring, that will nearly double legal and supportive services for such renters, many of whom are threatened with losing their homes simply for standing up for their right to safe, quality, and affordable housing. As chair of Council's Committee on Children and Youth, and as a mother, I know how profoundly access to safe, stable housing affects families, as well as their physical and mental health, their access to jobs and employment. We are learning more and more that the lack of stability of housing is not just a factor of poverty, but may actually be a contributor to it. In a city where there are more than 20,000 evictions filed each year, this type of legal assistance is desperately needed, and it will make a tremendous difference. Too many low-income renters lack access to legal assistance and representation through a process that is heavily weighted towards benefiting landlords. More than 80% of landlords come to eviction hearings with legal representation. Less than 1% of renters do. And I also want to note the tremendous work of Pulitzer Prize winner Matthew Desmond and his phenomenal book, Eviction, which inspired many of us and also shone a light on the realities that many people, especially behind me, have been living and understanding for a number of years. Eviction brought to national attention to this issue, and I also want to point out that Ira Goldstein's research here at Philadelphia's own reinvestment fund showed us both the scale of the problem actually in Philadelphia and its disproportionate impact on families and on communities of color. I also want to credit the reporting of Planned Philly's Jake Bloomgart, which let us see how tenants fare in eviction court when they actually do lack representation. All of these things together make such a difference to pushing forward to where we are here today. The city's significant investment is enormous, and as I said before, it will nearly double the legal assistance for low-income renters and will allow us to expand right to counsel in our city, which is a tremendous fight that has been led by civil rights and legal advocates in our city. I want to thank all the stakeholders who made this win possible. In particular, I want to acknowledge the work of my colleagues, Maria Quinones-Sanchez, Bill Greenlee, and Derek Green, as well as our council president, Darrell Clark. Councilwoman Quinones-Sanchez has been a true leader in improving housing quality and fighting uninhabitable and unlicensed rentals. And Councilman Greenlee has been a champion for fair housing. Councilman Green also has been a staunch supporter of our legal services community. I have to point out Eva Gladstein and Fedulin and the administration for working with us to make this a reality today for our residents. And I'd also like to mention the powerful work of Liz Hirsch, who is leading our Office of Homeless Services. Rue Landau is at the Fair Housing Commission, Mitch Little at CEO, and together, all of us form a true interagency strategy. I am excited to work with you. I'm proud for the work that we've got ahead, and I know that there's so much to be done, but let's take a moment and just celebrate this day today. Of course, I'd be remiss not to mention Phil Lord at Tenants' Rights Union and the Bar Association, Civil Gideon, and Access to Justice Task Force. All of the legal organizations and law firms who believe in this work have banded together to help advance the vision of right to counsel here in our city, and it's all of your work that inspires us. And of course, most of all, I have to acknowledge the real heroes of this fight. Tenants and renters, our families, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, who have fought for their rights, oftentimes when nobody was paying attention, who have stood up for themselves and their families, for their children, and for their right to housing in a city that desperately needs their voices. They have testified in City Council, they have led the way, and they have never flagged in their belief that this city can and must do better. With this funding, Philadelphia is joining the forefront of a national movement. We look forward to paving this way with everybody here and to the work ahead. So thank you, everybody. We have a few great speakers who can shed some light on our stories and our history about this work and what we hope for what it brings ahead. First and foremost, I'd love to invite up Yasmin Vasquez, who is a renter in our city, a Philadelphian, and I'm proud to have her here. Yasmin, come
on up. Hi. 3 months ago, I testified to City Council. I told you that for low-income people, it is really hard to get a place to live in the city. It is harder to still get a place that is truly livable. You feel really restricted in your choices and like you have to settle for what is there, because that's all you can afford. That is what happened to me. When I first moved into my apartment, my landlord showed me it at 11 at night. There were not many lights on, and I could not see any signs of damages. My landlord knew I was desperate and told me everything was fine. The next day, I started moving stuff in, and I started noticing little things, and he said they would be fixed and that he was on it. But it was not just little things. There was a lot wrong with the apartment. Right when my mother and I moved in, there was a snowstorm, and I noticed that the heaters weren't working. I told the landlord, and instead of fixing it, he came to the apartment with a single space heater. That did not do the job, and because it was so cold, we slept in the same room, in the same bed. People shouldn't have to live like that. Eventually, I bought more space heaters myself. At the time, I also had the responsibility of caring for my newborn nephew. But because it was so cold in the apartment, I had to drop him off with family members at night so he could have a safe, warm place to sleep. He cried every time I left him. It took a toll on me because I was supposed to be the person to care for him. I will call to check up on him, but it was not enough. It still bothers me to this day, and the heat wasn't the only problem. I asked and asked and asked for the landlord and property manager to keep my property livable, but they never really did. Then something good happened. I happened to find a number for the Tenant Union Representative Network on the internet, and they told me to come in. I went to a class there, which helped me understand my rights and what to do next. But soon after, the landlord filed an eviction lawsuit against me. I was lucky to get a lawyer for the eviction case. We went to the landlord-tenant court, and once the property manager realized I had a lawyer, he said he had a family emergency, withdrew the case, and walked out. He never refiled it. It is really important for people to have a legal representation so they are not taken advantage of by certain landlords, doing things to tenants who can't defend themselves. People need to understand the laws, and people need to be given real help. We all need to help others who can't stand up for themselves. I never thought that when I testified to City Council, I would be back here celebrating something like this. Thank you all so much for listening to the people and for giving more tenants representation. It means a lot to us.
Thank you so much for your voice, Yasmin. And I'd like to bring up Rashida Phillips, Managing Attorney at Community Legal Services.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Rashida Phillips. I'm the Managing Attorney of the Housing Unit at Community Legal Services, which provides free legal advice and representation to thousands of low-income Philadelphians every year. We are so grateful to have worked with City Council and other partners and advocates for several decades to protect tenants and promote safe, affordable housing. It's the close collaboration of tenant advocate organizations such as TURN, Senior Law Center, Legal Clinic for the Disabled, Homeless Advocacy Project, and our partnerships with the Philadelphia Bar Association and countless others that really brings us to this moment. Eviction and lack of affordable, safe, and healthy housing is a major crisis in Philadelphia. It exacerbates poverty, poor health conditions, and housing instability. And we've all heard the statistics that landlords tend to get 10 times the amount of representation that low-income tenants get in landlord-tenant court. However, we're here today because leaders in our city have recognized that legal aid is one of the most effective and important ways of preventing homelessness, stabilizing neighborhoods, and promoting health, safety, and access to opportunities for people who are struggling to make their ends meet, which there are a lot of those people in our city. In particular, we would like to thank Councilwoman Helen Gim and Councilwoman Maria Quinones-Sanchez, as well as City Council staff members Shanae Garner, Jennifer Cates, and Eric Bodson for bringing attention to this important issue at such a critical time in our country. The Mayor's Office and all members of Philadelphia City Council really should be commended for taking action to prevent unjustified evictions for some of our city's most vulnerable families, and for recognizing that housing is, if not the most important, one of the most important stabilizing factors as a gateway to employment, education, and other opportunities. We would also like to thank leaders in the private bar, particularly Ethan Fogel, Joe Sullivan, and in the Philadelphia Bar Association, such as Debbie Gross, Meryl Zeeby, and Kathy Carr, for using their time and their talents to stand up for low-income tenants. Finally, we would like to thank the tenants themselves and the residents for speaking up and letting people know that this is a critical need. They are the ones experiencing these issues, and it's their voice that should be heard the loudest. And I think it's safe to say that their voices have been heard. So there's still a lot of work to be done, of course, to ensure that Philadelphians can access safe, stable, and affordable housing, but CLS and our partners stand ready to fight for that fairness. Thank you again. I can't thank you enough. This is really an extraordinary moment for our city, I think. And I just thank you all for being brave, creative, and unrelenting in ensuring equity, justice, and safe, affordable communities. Thank you.
We couldn't do this work without the partnership of Eva Gladstein at the Managing Director's Office. Eva?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you particularly to Councilwoman Gim and the other members of City Council for taking this issue on and finishing the deed, you know, not just taking it on, but getting it done. And most importantly, to all the tenants and the advocates who have struggled for years to raise the issues, those who testified at City Council and in other places, have been to eviction court, have suffered the consequences, usually negative. We really appreciate that. I'm going to get personal for a moment. I am personally so excited to see the funding, not just as Deputy Managing Director for the city, but also because this has been an unrecognized part of the affordable housing crisis for years and years, and it feels particularly important to me that the needs of low-income renters are recognized at this point in time. I think many of you know I spent about 20 years in the predecessor organization to TURN, working with Phil Lord and others in this room, and Liz Hirsch was there as well, helping to teach tenants their rights and to represent themselves in court, and to try to work to really change the systems so that, that they were not so predominantly one-sided, and that they would work towards equity and justice for everybody. In the last 25 years, there's been a tremendous amount of work by many of the people I mentioned, and a little bit has changed, but not much has changed. So it was interesting to me. I came into the position of Deputy Managing Director a year and a half ago, and I thought, I didn't think I was quite out of the housing world, and we had the Office of Homeless Services led by Liz, but it was really surprising to me to see how deeply the impact of evictions are and how it underscores the work of all 5 agencies in our cabinet. Because as Matthew Desmond documented, evictions actually force people into a deeper spiral of poverty. And so the Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity, our anti-poverty agency, has been working for about 3 years, convening many of the people in this room to elevate the issue and to talk about comprehensive and collaborative solutions. But we also know that when tenants don't have stable housing, it's much harder for them to access health services and enter into recovery, be it for a physical or a behavioral health problem. We also see the extent to which housing is a factor in child welfare cases, where families are separated or families who should be able to reunify are not able to reunify because of their lack of decent and affordable housing. We've seen in our health department that tenants are fearful of allowing in people who will inspect for lead paint and then remediate the poisoning because they're fearful of a retaliatory eviction. So we came together as a housing, as a cluster, our Health and Human Services cluster, to create a document which we just shorthand for Thrive, Together We Thrive, and it's about making sure everybody in the city is healthy, safe, and supported. And there are a number of strategies in there, a few dozen, but many of them deal with housing. In particular, preventing evictions, keeping people out of the homeless system, and expanding and helping ensure access to decent and affordable housing for many of our different populations that we work with. And this funding is critical to helping us achieve our goal and the goals of so many people in the room today. So we are really grateful for it, we are excited about it, and we are dedicated to trying to make sure it's used in the most impactful way, and that we're working strongly with everybody in this room and many, many others to demonstrate the effectiveness so we can attract even more resources. So thank you, everybody.
We're all here because we're invested in ending poverty. There isn't if we care about poverty, we care about housing, and there isn't a better champion for that than Ann Fedulin. Ann?
It's really, as so many of the other speakers said, it's really a pleasure to be here today. You know, a lot of times the city is faced with issues and problems sort of land at our doorstep with a thud. And when we get a chance to really work proactively together with a lot of different stakeholders and then come forward and really do something about it, it really is very rewarding. It's an incredible thing. And although we realize that this is not going to solve the problem, it's a big step in the right direction. And again, we should really celebrate that. Because I think a lot of times we tend to not celebrate these kinds of things enough. We kind of get bogged down in some of the negative stuff, and this is a really great thing, and we should embrace it, and we should really celebrate it. So last year, as part of our effort to affirmatively further fair housing, the city conducted an assessment of fair housing. And in order to complete that assessment, we had to analyze data, and we met with residents, and we strategized with stakeholders. And among one of our more disturbing findings was that more than 41,000 households were evicted in 2014 through 15. That represents 1 in every 7 renter households, right? 1 is too many. 1 in 7 is a crisis. Not surprisingly, these are our families with their least resources, and they face the highest eviction rates. They're also the families that are least likely to be able to explore options to remain in their current home or to find a new one. I'm more than pleased. I am excited, I am thrilled, I am over the moon that we are able to announce today that the city is providing resources to help these families stay in their homes. And we've kind of done something like this before. When there was a severe mortgage crisis in 2008, we supported community outreach, housing counseling, and legal assistance for homeowners facing foreclosure. And working with lenders and their attorneys, this nationally recognized program saved more than 10,000 homes from foreclosure. And this funding that we're talking about today is going to provide those same type of benefits to our renter community. Because, as we've heard from so many of the speakers today, keeping people in their homes is about so much more than housing. It's more than just preventing homelessness. Keeping people in their homes is about keeping kids in school. It's about keeping our workers employed. and it's about building and keeping our neighborhoods strong. I think if all of us think about where we're going to be in a couple hours, right? At the end of the day, we look so forward to going home. Imagine if you don't have that, if you don't know where you're going to. Are you going to be focused on sending your kids to school? Are you going to be focused on getting ready for your job the next day? No, you're going to focus on one thing. Where am I going to sleep tonight? How am I going to deal with my kids? Right? How am I going to get up and start another day tomorrow? That is why these kinds of programs and this kind of effort is so important. Evictions are a big problem in Philadelphia, and we're so lucky that we already have terrific organizations that are providing housing, counseling, and legal services to tenants. However, to date, there hasn't been enough funding to meet these demand for services, and the funding we announced today, we know will not meet the full demand, but again, it's a step in the right direction. And I have to really thank folks like Yasmin. I don't know if anybody's ever been to City Council and testified, but it is not easy. It's a little bit intimidating, and then to come back and have a press conference, you know, that's a huge thing. For our tenants, our renters, our community folks to find their voice and come forward and use it is really an incredible thing. And so we thank you. We thank you for coming forward. You know, and lastly, I think the reason we got here is when the folks standing behind us, the folks in this room, the people like Yasmin, when cities and officials start to see their residents as people, these are the things that happen. And so I thank all of you for realizing that we are a city of people and that housing needs to be at the forefront, and we need to house all of our people. The Department of Planning and Development is thrilled to be part of this. I have to thank Melissa, who's heading up our housing group. Right? Liz and Eva and Rue and all her folks that we work so closely together. Of course, City Council, incredible partners that we have, and all of you guys here. I mean, if we do this together, we can do something about it, and we really need to take this voice and this energy and bring more resources to our city. It's great that the city's putting this in, but this is a big issue, and we need to go after everybody that we can get and get as many dollars and resources in, because we need to take care of folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ann. I'd love to bring up my a true fair housing champion and my colleague in City Council, Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I believe that, and so many other members of council believe that one of our most important jobs of government is to help people that need help the most. And there's probably not too many groups of people that need help more when they need it than folks facing eviction, because you're literally talking about saving somebody from being in shelters or even worse, being on the street. So I'm proud to be a part of City Council working with the administration that saw how important this was. Certainly I want to particularly point out the advocacy of Councilwoman Gim, the Council President, Councilman Green, Councilwoman Sanchez, who have been working on this issue. And the good thing about all this, one of the many good things, is we know the money is going to be used in the right way, because you have all these folks that know what they're doing with it and have been at it for a long time and are just relentless advocates. In fact, I came in the room today and George Gould and Phil Lord grabbed me to advocate about something about tenants. So as I said, they never give up, and that's great, and that's to the benefit of all. So again, it's great to be here to celebrate, to see real people getting real help. So thank you very much. Thank you, Councilman.
Sure. I think I'm last. I get to wrap up all these amazing and wonderful comments. My name is Eric Bodson. I'm an attorney and legislative counsel to Councilwoman Maria Quinones-Sanchez. And I just want to thank, in particular, Councilman Gim, as well as Councilman Greenlee and Councilman Green for their tireless advocacy on this issue, for truly giving families a voice in their pursuit of safe and healthy homes. Councilwoman Sanchez has spent her entire career fighting to keep folks in safe and healthy homes. But I think, as Ann put best, when we think about the consequences of eviction. We often think about displacement, maybe even homelessness, but the consequences of displacement pervade every facet of someone's life. They uproot folks' schools and jobs. They threaten families' health and stability and safety. And they're truly life-altering for families across the city of Philadelphia. And so it's really important to look to the work ahead, but also recognize this moment and all the people behind me in pursuit of making sure that every Philadelphian has access to a safe and healthy home. And when we talk about specifically providing legal representation in landlord-tenant court, anyone in this room who's been in municipal court and been a part of our landlord-tenant system can speak to the need for better access, better efficiency, more transparency, so that when an issue does arise between a landlord and a tenant, we're not left with the dire consequences of eviction and substandard housing in our city. And that requires more legal representation, but it also requires more efficient administration. And so I want to particularly thank Ann Fedulin, Eva Gladstein, Dave Perry on the code enforcement side of all this, and Liz Hirsch for their continued partnership with our office and with Councilwoman Gim to make sure that our city is efficient and accessible for folks who are having a landlord-tenant issue. And so we're not left with the consequences of displacement and homelessness in the city of Philadelphia. And I wrote down before I start a list of all the stakeholders who aren't up here to thank. They're too lengthy to name every single person in this room, although I at least see Kathy, Karen, and Joe, who should be up here with us. But I want to particularly thank Jennifer Cates and Sinead Gardner for their unbelievable... And Ian Gavigan as well. The work they put together to truly give folks a voice over the past year has been nothing short of tremendous. I mean, Jennifer never ceases to inspire me and teach me every day at this job, but this was above and beyond anything I've seen in terms of the tireless advocacy, and I think as Phil put in the email, unprecedented collaboration between this group of stakeholders. And it's been a wonderful thing to be a part of it, and I thank you all.
So I'm just going to close it out by saying there's just tremendous power in local movements. There's tremendous power when movements for justice, advocacy organizations, our tenants who are fighting for their own rights come together and work within government. That, to me, is the future of what politics needs to be, both a collaboration and a broader envisioning, and even when sometimes our government and our politics can look at their worst, I believe that local movements can rise up amid that and transform the way we look at one another, most importantly of all. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. If you have any other questions, you can come up to us individually. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.